Hello and welcome back to the Second City podcast with me, Callum Byrne.
And me, Daniel Sketchley.
We've been away for a couple of weeks here and there, sort of traveling all over the world, as I'm sure we'll get onto. Obviously, there's no games at the moment; it's the off season, so got a few bits and pieces to talk about across the Second City, whether it be Birmingham City looking for another manager, Aston Villa locking theirs in for 5 years, and a few other bits and bobs. So, a bit of a slightly shorter, smaller episode this week. But Dan, how are you? You were obviously had a nice little trip to Ireland a week or two ago. How was that?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, it was lovely, thanks. One of my old uni housemates got married in Antrim near Belfast. So that was I got back just over a week ago. So that was lovely, nice couple of days over there. Never been to Belfast before, so it's a nice city to tick off. Beautiful place. Yeah, was on the Guinness over there. Went down really well. Never been a big Guinness drinker, but it was quite nice. So yeah, I'm all good. And kind of, yeah, as you mentioned, good to be back doing the pod again. We're gonna do like a full blown like season review very shortly, like we did at the end of last year. That'll probably be in a couple of weeks. But yeah, for now we're gonna do like a little kind of reacting to like some of the news that's happened in the postseason and so on. But yeah, but how are you? You have had a trip of your own, haven't you, the last few days?
Yeah, I had my trip to the Europa Conference League final,
Yeah.
which was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. In with the Olympiacos fans near enough because even though we had tickets for like the neutral section, it was all Olympiacos.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I can imagine.
um,
Yeah, I heard it was quite a dour match.
a
I didn't actually see the game.
terrible, great
Yeah.
atmosphere, awful, awful game.
Mm,
Um, but the ending of it, obviously, was a 115th minute winner for Olympiacos,
mm.
so it's kind of worth it for a last minute winner.
Yeah.
But yeah, was great, and a European final was kind of cool. Stadium, amazing stadium. AEK,
Mm.
OPAP Arena, I think it is. But yeah, had a great time. I enjoyed the whole experience until the trophy lift, and that was very much what could have been kind of moment.
Well, I was gonna say, like, and we had a couple of people when, because obviously you got your tickets in. Did you get them in a ballot or something? It was like before
Yeah,
you knew if Villa were getting through or not.
before the
But I was like,
semi-final.
yeah, not. But I was like, I just even if you don't go through, just even if you don't go to the game, just go to a new country, new city to tick off. Why not? Um, but no, I'm glad you had a good time anyway. It was nice as well being able to rest easy, knowing that Villa weren't in the Conference League
Yeah.
final. I didn't have to keep an eye on it really. I wasn't too fussed about watching it. I definitely want to watch it if Villa were in it. I really hate watching Villa in finals and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, but no, sweet. Shall we get into this week then? So we'll start as we always do with what we're wearing, if that sounds good to you, Cal.
Absolutely. I
Sweet.
guess you might as well guess mine first because this is going to be the easy one this week.
I guess, yeah. Well, it's oh well, yeah, okay. That is a big giveaway. Well, it's an away white shirt with pinstripes. It's an old like a early 80s one. It says European Cup final Rotterdam, I believe, on it.
And,
So it's
and
got to
and the
be not.
date that I'm trying to hide.
Well, it's got to be. It has to be 1982, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Your away shirt. Did you play? Did you wear that when you played in the cup final?
Yeah. So this is the final we bought the shirt we wore in the final. So I kind of thought, well, I was just at a European final that we could have been in.
Yeah.
So yeah, lovely shirt. We've had quite a few remakes of this in the last few years. But this is obviously a remake of the original because that shirt is expensive and quite as all the shirts from that sort of era, they're quite rare as well. But yeah, a really nice shirt. From 81, 82, where we won the European Cup. Ron Saunders was the manager, but he left before the end of the season. And so Tony Barton was actually the manager when we won the European Cup. Um, Other than that, the season wasn't great. We were the league holders and we finished 11th. Fifth round of both domestic cups, and the top goal scorer in the league was Peter with 10 goals. So I can't, other than those few stats about the season, I don't really have too much else to say because we weren't really around. But a lot of legends for us at the time. You know, Jimmy Rimmer, Peter Gordon Cowans, Tony Morley, Dennis Mortimer, like players that are etched into our history forever, forever. And they won the European Cup for Aston Villa, which is pretty cool. And not many teams can say that.
Yeah, and I could be mistaken on this, but it could be an interesting one for us to do eventually on our Second City Stories series, because I believe obviously all the ones we've done so far are players that have kind of been in our lifetime and so on. But I believe Peter With played. Obviously, he's most famous for scoring the winner in your European Cup final. But I believe he played. He had two separate spells at Villa and two separate spells at Blues. I may be wrong on that, but I
Yeah, and
think
Ron
that's right.
Saunders went to Blues as well as a manager.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, yeah, he did. Yeah, and West Brom, I think he did eventually as well.
So
But yeah, it's also obviously we're recording this on the day of the Champions League final as well, so
yeah,
it's probably quite appropriate that you're wearing it.
which is
Uh,
also why there's a Real Madrid shirt in
yes,
the
we'll get
back
on
of
to
the
that. You're probably wondering why there's a fly emerald. You probably can't see those watching on YouTube. I'll get to that in a second. You probably can't see the logo.
yeah.
But all right, Cal, what am I wearing? What blue shirt is this?
You know what? There was a point when you were setting up before we went live, and I could see the back of the shirt, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't even realize you were wearing a blue shirt." I have no
So it's
memory. Yeah,
a
no.
red away shirt. Boyle Sports. This is betting as the sponsor. Nike kit maker. It's like just almost completely red. The sleeves are a bit lighter, but yeah.
I have no memory of this kit. I'll take a punt, I think. So
Would
Boyle
you like a clue?
Sports. I know from the Boyle Sports, I know it's roughly in the early 2020s. So we'll say 2021, 22, third, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit off. This is 2020, 21 away. So my clue would have been I haven't worn a kit from this season yet. Would have been my clue. I
Right.
don't know if that would have helped you all. But yeah, so this is 2020, 21. That's really 2020, 2021.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the one. Um, the reason so shout out to PS for lending me this one. I don't own any kits from this season myself, and it was just a weird time. So this was obviously COVID. So this was the only season really in my time as a Blues in our like time as football fans that I didn't go to a single game.
Yeah.
Obviously I couldn't. It was all behind closed doors. So I saw Karanka was the manager. Um, and yeah, it was a complete disaster. He ended up getting sacked in the March, and then Lee Bowyer came in as manager, someone who is one of my favorite Blues players ever. And yeah, it's just a weird time. We all know like what that COVID period was like and how bizarre it was for everyone. But I don't think I've ever been as certain of a managerial appointment going well as I was with Karanka. And he's probably someone we've not talked a lot on this podcast because obviously,
No.
like, I think there is like a detachment from that era because obviously we didn't go to games, we couldn't go to games, and in general, like, it was just a weird time, obviously. And obviously, I haven't worn any kits from that season, so I haven't really talked about it at all yet. But I was convinced it was going to be great. The fact that it was going to be like super defensive football and his training from his time with Mourinho and so on. I was like, I don't mind. We need just a style, and they're on about this 3-year plan that we're going to implement. And the first year was going to be like solidarity. The second year was going to be like try and get into playoffs, and the third year was going to be promotion. And it went so wrong. It was really awful. And I think if fans had been in the stadiums, it would have been a really bizarre atmosphere. We just couldn't score at all. And I think there's certain games I think we lost like because it was in COVID as well. You could pay to watch the games, and it wasn't like the Premier League games which you could get for free. Like the Championship, you had to pay like 10 quid to watch every game. And I think we played. I think was it Derby we played like on Boxing Day or maybe the game between Boxing Day and New Year, and we lost like 4-0 at home to Wayne Rooney, I believe. I believe Rooney was the manager actually of Derby. And then New Year's Day, we lost 2-0 to Blackburn. And I remember at that point being like, I am not paying to watch any more games. Like, I'm just going to stick on WM. I'm not paying anymore. Across this, I must have paid like a fortune across all them games. And the first game we played was actually a League Cup game, and it was at home against Cambridge. And bizarrely, it was a 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday. Obviously, because no one could go to the game, it like didn't matter. You could just do that. And yeah, we lost 1-0, and I was like, this may not go very well. But Bowyer came in like March time. Um, Kind of like the whole Rooney thing. I thought it was a huge shame that it didn't work out with Karanka. But Bowyer came in, and then that was the only period really in the whole season where I was like, oh, this would have been so great to be in the stadium for some of these games. Like I think it was Bowyer's first game. We beat Reading 2-1, and Duke scored a header in like the fourth minute or something. The game was live on Sky. We had a brilliant win against Swansea at home where we got a last minute penalty and Scott Hogan scored. We had an away win at Rotherham where we won 1-0, which was a huge step towards keeping us up. Harley Dean scored a late goal. And then the game which sealed our survival was 2-1 away at Derby, and we were 1-0 down. Again, Rooney's Derby. We were 1-0 down, and then Duke scored two headers around the hour mark within like a couple of minutes of each other. It was just fantastic. I was like, I wish I could have been at some of them games. But it's mad. We had a good run around December under Karanka where we finished where we beat Bristol City away 1-0, and then we beat Reading 2-1 a couple of days later. And we look back on that team, we're like, it's a disaster. We had some really weird signings come in, and players came in and never really clicked. People like Jonathan Lecco came in. Adam Clayton, unfortunately, he just didn't click at all. Alan Halilovic, Blues super fan on Twitter now, Mikel San Jose, Sam Cosgrove, players that just didn't work with at all. But that Bristol City game I use as an example. You can look up the starting 11 from that game. And so like the team is, so bearing in mind this is with the context of it being 4 years ago. So it's Neil Etheridge in goal, a back four of Maxine Collan, Mark Roberts, Harley Dean, and George Friend. Okay. Then your holding two midfielders were Sunjic and Kiftembeld. And then your three players behind the striker were Ivan Sanchez, who was class. John Terrell had came back this year, who was class. And then Jeremy Bella on the left, and then Scott Hogan up front. I'm like, how did that team finish like 20th? How could that team not do anything or whatever if it's like 18th or something? I was like, that. There's parts of that team that are really good. A three of Bella, Terrell, Sanchez is for the championship's brilliant. But yeah, that was that season. Kind of lost to time a little bit because obviously we didn't go to many games. Didn't go to any games. But yeah, so this is 2020, 2021 away.
I remember how confident you were with Karanka. I'll never forget it. You put a picture of Karanka when he got announced in our group chat and just wrote promotion
Yeah, so
underneath
I
it.
stole that. I stole that meme. I saw it on Twitter or something. It's a photo of him when he got announced as the Blues manager and he's on the cup and he's looking out. He's kind of wistfully looking out over the stadium, and someone wrote like in his eye line like the word. It's like he's looking at the word promotion in the sky, and that is now like a meme on our group. Every time Blues change manager, you always like edit the new manager's face onto
Yeah.
Karanka and put the word relegation beneath it
Yeah.
or something. And now, obviously, we've been through like 87 managers since then, so the meme's just completely out of control now. Um, but yes, as you alluded to, behind me, I have this beauty of a shirt. Real Madrid, that's 2019-20 away. Fly Emirates, the sponsor. It's blue with like a sort of
Wavy
kind of like
pattern?
wavy pattern on it. It's absolutely beautiful. Um, and I just thought I'd get it on because yeah, tonight is the Champions League final. And our boy Jude is playing in it. Of course, he could be a Champions League winner at like 20 years of age. I don't really care who wins. To be fair, I just hope it's a decent match. But like just meant like what an achievement it'd be for Jude, and I'd love to see him lift that trophy. To be fair. Um, so yeah, that's what we're wearing.
So we've got no games, obviously. So the biggest news came out maybe like a week or two ago, but we were indispensed. So Tony Mowbray has now left Birmingham City. I don't think it's a massive shock, really. Um, we'd spoken maybe on the last podcast a couple of weeks ago how while the season had only just finished, that was something that needed resolving very quickly, whether he was staying or not. Just because if he wasn't staying, your pre-season starting imminently. You probably for the clubs in League One, it'll probably start during the Euros. So it needed to be sorted straight away. So I guess Dan, your immediate reaction, your thoughts, obviously disappointed that it hasn't worked out.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not just Blues fans that think it's a huge shame. Like in terms, just for obviously from a perspective of Tony Mowbray's like health and so on. First of all, of course, though,
Yeah.
absolutely the right decision. I'm not like if he feels like obviously we don't know what the situation is exactly, but if he feels that's the right decision, then 100% it is the right decision. Football very much comes second. So we send our well wishes to Tony Mowbray. I hope he gets better soon and is in the dugout soon. But yeah, not a huge surprise. Just it'll be one of the great what could have been. He had 8 games as Blues manager, and I'm not joking when I say it, I think he's one of the most popular Blues managers like of our lifetime.
Yeah.
Um, you know, in 8 games, the improvement that we saw. We had that awful Sheffield Wednesday game, but otherwise, it was a really uplifting time, and it really looked like we were going to finish the season really strongly. And it means that our next manager. So we've been doing this podcast less than a year. We've been doing this podcast for about 10 months, 9, 10 months.
Yeah.
We're now looking for our fourth permanent manager in that time, and it'll be the seventh separate person to take charge of a game at Blues coming up, which is mental. So it's quite hard to get excited about new managers coming in. I actually said that when Tony Mowbray came in. We've had so many managers the last few years. Um, and so yeah, attention turns to who's coming in next. Have you seen some of the names linked, Cal? And because we've had quite a few linked.
Yeah, so I do have it was a slog to find it, but I found sort of the
Yeah.
latest odds. I think if you just said to me who do you think would get appointed, the most likely according to the bookies is probably who I would have said, which is Alex Neil. Liam
Hmm.
Rossignol is also linked, as is Gary Rowett, Darren Ferguson, Paul Heckingbottom, Ashley Cole, David Wagner, Will Still, Michael Beale, and then it all gets a bit sort of lost after that. Steve Bruce is on this
Yeah.
list at 14 to 1, so
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
never
God bless him.
know. Um,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
couple of decent managers on there,
It's
but
not the most inspiring or like like titillating list, is it? It's not the most like, it's the pulse racing one of them coming in. But that's not me being dismissive of it. As I say, we've had so many managers over the last few years that it is hard to get excited about it. I think Alex Neil and Paul. I think it'll be one of Alex Neil and Paul Heckingbottom, who obviously have promotion experience. I know Alex Neil didn't have a good time at Stoke recently, but he obviously got Sunderland promoted, I believe. He
he did,
had a
yeah.
good few years at Preston.
He got Norwich
I
promoted to the Premier League,
He
like
did, yeah, he did.
10 years ago.
Yeah, and he's younger than people think as well. Like you would think he'd be old. It feels like he's been around forever, but I think he's like early 40s, I think. Um, So him and obviously Heckingbottom then was at Sheffield United and kind of I think he took over from Chris Wilder, didn't he? And
Yeah, so he took over from Chris Wilder when they were basically already relegated in that lockdown
mm,
season, and
uh,
then stayed in charge. They got into the playoffs, stayed in charge. They got promoted second with 90 something points last season, and then obviously was sacked during this season.
yeah, and I think with them too, I think either of them I'd be absolutely fine with the appointment, and I think they would probably get us out of League One. I've seen a few people saying, should we instead be trying to get someone in who can get us into the Championship and then go again and take that philosophy into the Championship and keep that playing style going, kind of like what Ipswich did, where they were able to use their relegation to League One or that time in League One as like a foundation to completely change the playing style at the club. And I do get that, but in my opinion, prioritize someone who's just going to get you out of League One. Let's worry about the Championship. Like I agree, maybe set the foundation and the playing style, but let's just get the best person in who's going to get us out of League One for now.
Slightly different circumstances to Ipswich as well, just in terms of maybe not Ipswich aren't really a small club, but obviously financially them dropping into League One probably isn't as bad as maybe it is for you.
Yeah, I guess, I guess. Um, I think it probably will be Alex Neil. He's the name who kind of isn't going away. I think as well, maybe it's just like after Mowbray, who is, I know he doesn't like look at it at first glance, but he's a very charismatic, likable, warm personality, if you know what I mean. And not to judge book by its cover, but Alex Neil and Paul Heckingbottom aren't, if you know what I mean. They're like, they're very, but there would be two safe, solid appointments. Obviously, I would get behind them. I don't really have a preference of the two. I think they both would be very qualified to do the job. As again, I know Heckingbottom didn't have a great time at Stoke, but I think quite like Mourinho would probably struggle at Stoke, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, Other ones, Dave Challoner, who was at Stockport. He obviously has been linked with a lot. Um, Sorry, he's been strongly linked with the job, and he's kind of the opposite to them in terms of Heckingbottom and Neil are managers who have managed at a high level, and they're talking about coming back down to League One. Challoner obviously has just got Stockport promoted at the top of League Two and is being linked with taking the step up to Blues. I think that would be an interesting one as well. A bit more of a gamble. But again, in terms of implementing that playing style and bringing a young manager up and giving him that chance in League One with a big club like Blues would be really interesting. But for me, the one I would like really like to see from like an emotional or like just a maybe not the most logical point of view, but like I'd love Racine. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen, but like we've bigged him up on this podcast before.
Yeah.
I think he's a really good young manager. I know like a lot of people have said recently his whole team actually maybe slightly underperformed last year, even though they finished seventh with like the quality of some of their players. And we saw it when we played them. They would sometimes just struggle to break us down. Like we played them 4 times last season, and I think they only beat us once in that time. Um, they would really struggle to break a team even as bad as us down at times. And obviously in League One, we are like maybe that someone like Dave Challoner, his teams are much more used to being like front footed, and Rossini's maybe not so much, if you know what I mean. But I'd be so excited if it was Rossini. I just think from again maybe a more emotional view and not so much logical. But I talk about like having how Mowbray was this like this figure you could really like be excited by and like
Yeah.
respect and this kind of warm presence. I think Rossini would bring that. Um, so yeah, maybe not the most logical, but from like just a fanboy point of view, I think that'd be really cool. People that I don't want, I can't believe Ashley Cole has been linked with the permanent job. So Cole has been there since like October, I think. Apparently, he's been the set piece coach. It's weird because he's a really highly rated coach by all accounts. Like obviously, he was at England. Apparently, all the coaches that came in involved him in training because they really rate him as a coach. I just, he's never managed before at a first team level. Apparently, he's been the set piece coach. Our set pieces have been awful, awful, like for years, and he has not improved them at all, in my opinion. Um, Will Still, I think, would be interesting, but I don't. Again, he's never really done it at this level in this country. I feel like it's maybe I don't know. I feel like that'd be a big risk. I think he was at Reims in France, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So
Heavily
there's some
linked with
interesting names there.
Sunderland as well.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I think it'll probably be Neil or Heckingbottom. Neil is probably the one I think it will be. I personally would love to see Rosenior get it. But I'd be on board with Neil or Heckingbottom as well. And again, like kind of from like an emotional, non-logical point of view, even like Rowett coming back, I would be absolutely fine with. But that's not going to happen. And I say from an emotional point of view because Rowett, I think, would get us out of League One, but maybe kind of like Rosenior, it maybe wouldn't be all that pretty or exciting. It would be like functional. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I stand on it all. My pick would be Racine, yeah, but I don't know if that I don't see that happening. What do you think from like the outside looking in?
I mean, Alex Neil has got to be the the best candidate for it. Really, it's hard. If you're looking
Yeah,
at maybe like an Ipswich, nobody would have really heard or known of Akira McKenna before.
no, no,
He would have been a complete unknown. Unlike, I guess, sometimes those complete unknowns they work, and sometimes they are really going to not work, and they are going to backfire. Um,
yeah.
I'd say I'd be avoiding Michael Beale and Steven Gerrard if
Oh
they're on the
dear,
list.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's got to be Alex Neil, surely. I mean, whether
yeah.
he
And I'd
if
be
he
fine
wants
with
it,
that. Yeah.
obviously. But yeah, because at least you know that he's a decent championship level manager as well. Um,
True. I think
if
that's the
you,
thing with him, Heckingbottom and Rosenior. They've all like I know they maybe wouldn't be the person to then take us do what McKenna's done and take them straight back up into the Premier League with Ipswich, but they are functional, solid, experienced Championship managers at least.
yeah, yeah. I mean, League One can be a different kettle of fish entirely, but yeah. I mean, Liam Rossini, I don't think he would drop down to League One. I think he will easily
No, no, I
find
don't
another
think
championship job. At
so.
least from the outside looking in, it seems that while maybe his whole team might have slightly underperformed with some of the players they had, it's very much considered he's done a very good job there, and I think he's done a very good job there because that whole team the year before were rubbish,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
completely.
it's hard to completely turn that around and be, let's if we're being honest, they wouldn't have won the playoffs, I don't think.
No, no
Um,
chance.
so yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, that's it'd be interesting to see when an announcement is made. The club haven't really given a timeline on it in any way. Sounds like interviews and so on are probably still going on or have only just finished. But yeah, like you say, pre-season's probably not going to be that far away. And we've got a huge rebuild job on. We'll get onto like obviously some of the goings on with the players and so on in a bit. But yeah, it's a big rebuild job on, big recruitment job on. So it is absolutely essential to get the right man in.
Yeah, and
But yeah, sure.
because that Mowbray news has been made, or that decision has been made, there now is that little bit of time to find the right manager. As
Yeah,
whereas if the Mowbray thing had dragged on for 2 or 3 weeks, then you're starting to panic.
yeah, of course, of course. Sweet. Where do you want to move on to now, Cal? Did you want to jump over to Villa for a bit, or should we talk about what's going on with the Blues a bit more? Or...
Uh, well, we're talking about managers, so let's talk about the Aston Villa manager for a couple of minutes. Which
Yeah,
great news, which broke out this week, which is Unai Emery. It was kind of Unai Emery signed a new 5-year contract. It was kind of known about that. When his sort of the option extension was activated, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, that they were going to sit down and sort out a new contract with him in the summer. It was just, I guess, that activation was just to alleviate any worries maybe people had with links to Bayern Munich or something. So, but yeah, new 5-year contract, 5-year deal, a long, long deal for a manager, and I think it kind of just shows how sort of locked in he is at Aston Villa. Um, the way that we've given him the keys to the castle, sort of thing. He's got all of his backroom team that he wants. We're investing in the there's a Spanish team that he sort of co-owns that we've got an agreement with, and some sort of pumping a little bit of money into that. And he's more than just the man in the dugout at Aston Villa now. And I think, because of the success we're seeing on the pitch, the ownership are very much, you might have, I think back to Aston Villa of like 2020 when it was like build the team around Jack Grealish. It's now build the team around Unai Emery and what he wants to do here, because what he's done in a very short space of time, with a lot of the same playing squad that we had under Dean Smith and Steven Gerrard. What can he do if we really let him free to kind of do what he wants? So, um, really exciting times. I do. I think if we're ever going to win a trophy in my lifetime, Dan, it is going to be with this manager. I truly believe that. I know it didn't quite happen this year, but yeah, really, really exciting times, I think, for us as we start our adventure into the Champions League next year, which is going to be just enjoy the ride. But yeah, that's kind of about it, really. The press release didn't say anything more interesting. The only main tidbit, I guess, is that a slight change in title. So when Dean Smith became the manager, he became the head coach, the first head coach we've ever had at Villa Park. And then Steven Gerrard and Unai Emery had also been the head coach. That has now changed back to manager. So, I think that just shows a bit more sort of he's more than just the man in the dugout now. It's just the way football's
yeah,
changed really now, isn't it? It's like it went from manager and most are now at head coach. And so it's quite rare to see someone as manager now.
yeah. And I think something similar happened with Arteta at Arsenal. He was originally the head coach, and then they changed his job title to manager. Eventually, it was kind of like just a show of like faith and
Yeah.
that he was in a bit more power maybe being put on him, probably a bit more say in transfers and so
Yeah,
on.
I'd imagine so. Yeah.
Um, yeah. You've also got your new badge has finally been announced, I believe.
Yeah, finally, it's all out there. Yeah.
Let's never talk about it ever again.
Honestly, I'm sick of talking about it myself. It's obviously
Yeah.
the slight new version of the Shield. Maybe the sort of slightly interesting thing. I thought the video that the club put out was really interesting because it was more than just here's the new badge. There was sort of like a bit of explanation into why they'd done certain things with it, and sort of the whole new brand package is basically kind of what they did. So like example graphics of what they'll put out on, say, the socials next year, some things that'll probably go on the website, the new typeface for the club, which is actually this. So this was an Easter egg that we didn't know about um, on the final home game of the season. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be the new font on the back of the shirts in the cup competitions next year. It's quite nice. I think I prefer it to the one we've had this year. The only annoying thing is, and I can't show you because it's not on the flag, is that the letter N is the only one that isn't capitalized, and it really annoys
Oh,
me. So
fair enough.
that's going to really bug me if they don't change that. So Yeah, I won't be getting Watkins on the back of the shirt because
Y-
it's I have to get
you
someone.
know things are going well at Villa when that's
Yeah,
what you're complaining about.
I know, I know.
That would
But
be the
yeah.
least of our worries at Blues.
Do you
Alex
even have
Neil
do
with
you even
a
have a cup font at
uncapitalised
Blues?
N. Oh no, no, don't worry. Well, we will maybe we'll win the Bristol Street Motors Trophy
Yeah.
next year. I don't know.
But yeah, that's kind of that. So hopefully we never talk about badges ever again. We haven't done our released and retained list at Villa yet, but it's finally come out at Birmingham City. It's something we'd sort of talked about. Any major surprises in there, Dan? I don't think there really is there?
No, we probably won't spend too long on it. I believe it's been obviously been a few weeks since we did our last episode, but I think we touched on it. I think I talked about what I would do with it,
Yeah.
and they pretty much have done exactly what I wanted them to do. So that's really nice, and probably feels like the first year ever where that's happened. Um, really just a logical release and retain list, I think. So straight up, Keshi Anderson's had a year contract activated. His year extension on his contract activated, so he'll be with us next year for sure. I think if he can stay fit, I think he'll be a really high quality player in League One. I think we could really see the best of him. I really like him as a player, so I'm excited about that. And then Juki and John Ruddy have been offered new deals. I think I said I'd definitely offer Juki a new deal, and I said with the keepers I would be fine if one of them was offered a new deal. I think keeping Juki and John Ruddy around, even just for leadership, like we're gonna have a huge turnover of players this summer. Keeping them guys around for leadership is essential, I think. And you kind of heard a lot towards the end of last season. Rowett said as much after the last game was that standards have really slipped, and he hasn't seen from everyone that elite performance and that elite dedication to the job from everyone. He didn't name names, but I think keeping top pros around like Ruddy and Duke I think it's essential because we're going to need good eggs and good characters in there if we're going to get out of League One. Important to say though that they've been offered a new deal. They haven't accepted it yet,
Mm.
or it at least hasn't been announced that they've accepted it yet. You wouldn't be shocked if Duke had some lower end championship offers and league offers in League One. But I'd love it if them guys would stay out. I think that would be a real help. But it does mean we've released a few players. Amongst them are Hogan. Scott Hogan, after 4.5 years at Blues, has left. Ivan Sunjic, Gary Gardner, and Mark Roberts have all left. I kind of, Hogan. I think we talked about Hogan a bit. Like he's an anomaly at Blues. Like he's given us some amazing memories at Blues, like his incredible hat trick away at West Brom. But it was absolutely time to call time on that. And you kind of assume he was probably one of the ones that maybe not had these performance levels as high, and maybe the one that Rowett is referring to, seeing as Rowett just didn't seem interested in playing him at all. Very like brought him off the bench like once or twice for like a few minutes, but that was it. And then the other players like Sunjic, I like Sunjic, and I hope he does well wherever he goes. But it was probably time to part ways, and same with Gary Gardner, who I actually think people are a bit harsh on. I actually think Gary Gardner's got he's got some great goals for Blues over the years as well. His free kick against West Brom last season and was amazing, and he's got a brilliant goal away at Luton a few years ago, and we won 5-0 as well. Um, Roberts, definitely time to move Roberts on, although I think he'd be okay in League One. I think he'd do a job. I think it's just time to move on from some of these players. Like Roberts has been with us for, I know Duke's been with us even longer, but Roberts has been with us for about 7 or 8 years now. I think 2017, I think he signed. Redknapp, I think, signed him. So just time to move on from some of these players. Neil Etheridge has moved on as well. We didn't keep both keepers. Etheridge and Ruddy, I think if we're going to build more of a possession-based style of play, playing out from the back a bit more, having both goalkeepers, Etheridge and Ruddy, two players that are not suited to that at all, I think it maybe makes sense to keep one of them and then get in a keeper who is more adept with their feet as well. So yeah, I can't argue with it at all. Be very interesting to see where some of them end up, particularly Hogan. I think it'll be really interesting to see. Does he get another low end championship club? I don't know if he does. Um,
Maybe a Rotherham. Oh, well, I suppose they got relegated,
League
didn't
One,
they?
yeah.
So yeah.
But yeah, it wouldn't shock you. But the other thing as well is they're like I don't know the exact figures, obviously, but the amount of money collectively them five were on, like Hogan,
Well, Hogan was effectively on
Gardner,
Premier League
Sunjic,
money, wasn't he? Because he came from
by
us.
all accounts. By all accounts, yeah. And bear in mind, Sunjic as well was our record transfer signing um, in 2019. So he must have been on some decent whack, I'd imagine. So yeah, that's the release and retained. I agree with it. Bear in mind as well that we got a lot of loan players leaving, like obviously Stansfield, Dramer. Um, so it's kind of a lot of players are leaving, and the squad is very threadbare. My point being, um, but no, I think they made the right decision, and be interesting to see where the recruitment goes from here.
Absolutely. Probably the final thing on the Villa side of things this week is I saw a little like not so much a rumor, but maybe like somewhere in between a leak and a rumor that some data had been sort of lost by Aston Villa, and there was actually a statement that just went straight onto the website yesterday. They didn't put it out, they didn't tweet it, they didn't announce it, they just sort of slipped it on there, maybe because they had to, and then didn't make a big hoo-ha about it. Which was that Villa was aware of recent news reports that an accessible Amazon Web Services S3 bucket, which is basically like an online storage server, which reportedly contains fan membership data. Um, First and foremost, Aston Villa takes the privacy and security very seriously, and they're carrying out a full and robust investigation into the reports. But the club believes that the reports relate to the vulnerability of one of its service provider systems, which apparently, according to the club, has been closed. And they have been informed by AWS that no password or payment data has been compromised, but the club is continuing to sort of look into it and make sure that is the case, and will update if anything else is going on. So I would say if you're a season ticket holder or a member at Aston Villa, change your password just to be safe.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Make sure you got
um,
some punctuation in there, some capital letters.
yeah.
You want to go on
What is it
it.
like? 18 characters, you know?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, something like that. No, yeah, let's hope that gets resolved soon. Hope there's no major issues in terms of privacy with that. But
Yeah.
yeah, cool. We're going to end this episode with one more story, which is there was a bit of news, obviously related to the Blues somewhat, but it's that a managerial appointment elsewhere that's taken place. So that
Yeah.
place is Plymouth Argyle. That is Mr. Wayne Rooney is back in the dugout. He's got a new job at Plymouth, a club that stayed up at our expense by a point, I think it was. Um, Rooney's still in a division above us. How has this happened?
How has he got a
Um,
championship job? Genuinely, how has he managed to wrangle that?
yeah,
Like,
mental. Yeah,
granted, it's not a high level championship club, but still.
no, but also Plymouth aren't like when that place is packed out, it can be pretty mental. There, it's a pretty big club for him to go back into, considering the career he's had so far. Um, I think it'd be really interesting to see how he gets on with because he's kind of got no excuse again. I kind of felt like he had no excuse at Blues, but he has got a full preseason this time. He's gone in May. Although I think he's working on the Euros
Yeah,
with the
with
BBC, I think, for a bit,
yeah,
isn't
he's on one
he?
of them. Yeah,
Yeah. So it'd be really interesting to see how he gets on. I think obviously at Blues it was a disaster, and it was I said on here at the time, I think it's a huge shame it's not worked out. I think it's a shame from my point of view because I we're of the age where like Rooney was the man. When we were growing up, he was
yeah,
he's arguably the best English player ever. I don't think that's ridiculous to say. One of the greatest Premier League players ever. I think it's a bit of a shame because I do like taking his time at Blues aside. I do quite like him. I think he's like
yeah.
obviously he did the FA Cup final last week with the BBC and he's been doing a bit with Sky Sports. I find it really interesting that he's decided to go back into management so soon. Maybe too soon, I think. I remember when like Lee Clark left Blues and he had an awful time at Blues and he went straight into Blackpool like a week later. I was like, why would you do
Yeah,
that?
or like Dean Smith when he
Um,
went from Villa to Norwich, and that was never going to be
yeah.
the right job for him.
No, it's almost like they're so desperate to prove like that they can do it. But I
Yeah.
think Plymouth, obviously, they started last season quite well and then really tailed off.
Well, they lost their
Um,
manager at Christmas, didn't they? Stephen Schumacher
yeah,
went to Stoke, and that didn't work out for him.
yeah. And so I wouldn't be shocked if we see a bit of second season syndrome with them as well, where
Yeah.
I think it's going to be even tougher for them this year when teams kind of know what they are a bit more. I think purely because of their their lack of financial power in the championship and so on. I think it is an uphill battle, and I think if they go down with him or they go down this season and he's the manager for part of it, I think it's going to be another blot on his CV. But I do think it's worth commending, like the that takes like a lot of guts, in my opinion. Like you failed so badly at Blues, and yeah, I don't know. I do think that's commendable because Rooney's like he's obviously got loads of media work recently. He's been on that awful overlap thing that Gary Neville
Oh
does.
yeah.
That Man United
The Man
podcast.
United podcast, yeah.
Yeah, like it wouldn't be awful, but it is a Man United podcast. That's what annoys me about it because it
Yeah.
could be good. It should be really good, but and he's just he's guaranteed like work forever if he just did that. People are
Yeah.
interested in him. Like he's got this mad story and the Wayne Rooney story and all that. So he could just do that forever. So I think it's quite commendable that he, instead of doing that easy job, he wants to really test himself as a manager and stick to what he really wants to do. So I do think it's commendable. Um, I think if I was someone like Liam Rossini and if I'd applied for that job, I'd be like, really? Like what?
Yeah.
Like, probably a lot of people like that feeling like that right now. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he gets on. It's gonna be tough for him. He's had 3 jobs now before Derby, DC, and Blues. So yeah,
Effectively
be
two
interesting to see how he gets on.
relegations.
Yeah, pretty much. And DC, it's kind of hard to compare, the level of it and with the Championship and English football in general. So
And he didn't do
I
great there,
haven't.
right?
No, I haven't seen it. Apparently the Plymouth on like their social media they put out a video where they talked about why they'd done it, and they said like his work at Derby and at DC was really encouraged us, and they said we basically ignored his work at Birmingham. I was like,
Yeah.
what? That was his most recent work.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it as paraphrasing, but no, it'd be very interesting to see what happens there.
No, I do agree with that though, in terms of, to go and get a good, a decent gig after a disaster at Blues. He didn't do what Steven Gerrard did and just go to the Saudi League for some money. Although he said he didn't go there for the money this week. He obviously went there for the football.
I did mean
Certainly
to
didn't
ask
go
you
there for the
about
money.
that. I did mean to ask you about that. He was kind of defending himself a bit, wasn't he, Gerrard? I
Yeah,
think.
he was trying to throw players under the bus and say he said something like, "We started off and our form was in like top 5 in the league." I was like, "Yes, it's called a new manager bounce, Stephen." Like I don't
Yeah.
know. If I was Steven Gerrard, I don't think I'd be piping up talking about Aston Villa after we've just qualified for the Champions League with the same players that the new manager is. Like I don't know
Yeah,
the ego of that man. He can't let it go.
no, and apparently he's had a shocking time in Saudi. I don't know exactly what's going on, but apparently he's had a terrible time. Like his team's been awful, apparently. Um,
Well, you think all
yeah,
the
so
star players that went to the Saudi League last year, his team signed Damari Gray and Jordan Henderson. And like,
yeah,
bearing in mind, Benzema, Neymar, Mane, Kante,
Ronaldo,
Laporte,
yeah,
yeah, Ronaldo all went there, and he ended up with Jordan Henderson and Damari Gray. Like,
yeah, crazy. Yeah, I think England, the golden generation, as theirs it was called, their as managing skills got a lot to be proven still. Really, a lot of them have.
it's like,
Apparently, Ashley Cole's the best one. Apparently,
yeah.
it's like, um, so no, it'd be interesting to see what happens there. Sweet, shall we wrap it up there for this episode then, Cal?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did mention we do have the 2023-2024 season review. It's all planned. We're going to go film it in person. So you'll have to wait a couple of weeks for that. We do have an episode next week. We're going to be previewing Euro 2024. So something to look forward to there. Remember to like, subscribe, 5-star reviews, depending on what you're watching, what you're listening on. And yeah, I guess that's about it, Dan. I'll see you next week and up the Villa.
Keep right on, shit on the Villa, and see you next time. Take it easy.